You know, it broke my heart making this video. It really did. What's up everyone, it's TheJarvitar here with the second installment in These Pokemon Need Buffs. Last month I put out a video talking about some Pokemon that I feel like have been left behind by newer generations in terms of viability. And just as I have said in the past, the famous Johto Elite Four member Karen said that a Pokemon's strength should be irrelevant, and that we should always try to win with our favorites. But when it comes down to it, Karen, when my favorite is getting beaten to hell every time I throw it out, what point do we consider that abuse? Luckily though, my favorite is Tyranitar, so that's not much of an issue for me. But there are plenty of Johto Pokemon that are seriously needing some love right now. Specifically, these Pokemon that I'm about to go over are ones that I believe don't necessarily need evolutions, though with some of them I'd be fine with that, and we'll get to that later. But I think that these Pokemon just need a few changes here and there to give it the power that they need. These changes could take the form of simply a type change, a base stat increase, a new ability, move pool changes, or any of the above. Before we launch into these three Pokemon, if Pokemon videos like this are something that you're into, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more. If there are any Johto Pokemon that you feel like needed some love that I didn't talk about, or some ideas for some Gen 3 Pokemon that you'd like to see covered next time, no matter what that is, make sure to leave a comment below. With that, let's discuss one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. One that has found its way into my top 10, but I still feel like it needs some love. Crobat. Crobat is just so cool. Zubat really did end up with a generational glow up, but I'm gonna be honest, here's a hot take, but I've never had an issue running into Zubats in caves. Even when I played Red for the first time nearly 20 years ago, Mount Moon never seems to have given me a taste of the collective PTSD that the rest of the Pokemon community seems to have. Maybe it's because I just like the whole evolution line. Yeah, even Golbat. And also, yeah, even its red and blue sprite. Even though I played Red as my first Pokemon game, given how old I am, I played it nearly 10 years from its release. Gold and Silver came out in Japan in 1999, which means that at no time have I lived in a world where Crobat didn't also exist. I have always respected Zubat's potential, but you know who hasn't? Competitive Pokemon. Crobat has had such a hard time when it comes to its use in competitive formats. Going back years and years, the only time that Crobat has ever been able to crawl itself out of the underused tier is in Sword and Shield, which I guess is cool, but now it's completely unavailable. Thanks, Scarlet and Violet. My boy is gone. Sets that I've seen running Crobat often use it as a special attacker, given its access to Nasty Plot. Pair that with Sludge Bomb and its speed, and you can usually keep it out of trouble. But when it comes down to it, Crobat isn't a special attacker. It has base 70 special attack and 90 attack, so clearly there's a conflict of interest here. From my point of view, there are two ways to approach fixing this. We need to either commit to being a special attacker or physical. Sticking with being special could certainly work, but even with Nasty Plot, Crobat is too frail to reliably set that up. So let's switch around some of Crobat's base stats so that special attack is now its primary offensive choice. And let's take away 10 points from its attack so that Crobat now has 100. On top of that, we should give Crobat access to Intimidate. That way it's way more likely to have a shot at getting that Nasty Plot off without getting wrecked by a rogue Stone Edge. Now that set could certainly work, but personally, I'd prefer if we keep Crobat a physical attacker. Like, come on, this thing is meant to be hitting things head on. With that in mind, I definitely think we should do a similar thing like we did with the last set and make sure that its offensive stat is at 100 and we give it Intimidate. But unlike that set, we should also consider giving Crobat Swords Dance. Like, Vileplume can learn it, so I'm sure we can make the exception for Crobat. With that now being the set, I think that Crobat is a whole lot more dangerous. Its speed is already incredible, and giving it the ability to hit even harder, I think will certainly make the difference. That's also keeping in mind the synergy that Intimidate would have with a physically strong Crobat with U-Turn. As you can see, I'm not necessarily just throwing broken mechanics at these Pokemon. I just want them to be a little bit better so that they have a chance to succeed. You know what I mean? Next up, let's talk about a Pokemon that I think is going to surprise a lot of folks. This Pokemon is almost synonymous with a playthrough of a Gen 2 game. Like, you have to have used this Pokemon before. It's Ampharos. Now, when's the last time that you saw Ampharos do really well competitively? You really haven't. Even when this thing could Mega Evolve, the best it could ever do was crack into rarely used. Like, this thing is unfortunately just not doing anything for itself at the moment. Which is a shame, because Ampharos is one of the most iconic Pokemon from Gen 2. It balances all the right levels of friendly but also strong. Like, this is a Pokemon that I wouldn't be afraid of using in real life. And since I've used so many of them while running up and down the Johto region in various playthroughs that I've done, I can't help but want Ampharos to be something that I can take into whatever battle I'm going to fight. So let's go over its biggest weaknesses. When looking at its stats, we're met with some surprising value. Ampharos has a base stat total of 510, which is certainly doable. And I think that adding much to that total isn't necessary. Ampharos is certainly a special attacker with base 115, so I feel it's completely unnecessary to have 70 attack. We should redistribute some of those points. I personally don't see Ampharos as this hyper-aggressive attacker, especially when we take into account its moveset. Ampharos has access to one of the best defensive setup moves in the game, Cotton Guard, which in one turn raises Ampharos' defense by 3 stages. With that in mind, it's also perfect for setting up Light Screen. This kind of utility you can get out of a Pokemon is pretty significant. I say that we take 30 points away from Ampharos' attack and spread that over its HP, defense, and special defense. But this last thing that I want to do is what's really going to bring Ampharos into the spotlight. I say that we give Ampharos Electric Surge. The ability to instantly set up weather or terrain upon switch in is a surefire way to keep a Pokemon relevant. Like, for real, would Politoed or Torkoal really have any chance in competitive Pokemon if they didn't set up weather? At the moment, only 2 Pokemon have access to Electric Surge. Tapu Koko, of course, was the first Pokemon to have that ability. But in Gen 8, Pincurchin also got the ability. But not even Electric Terrain is worth dealing with using a Pincurchin on your team. So I say we should give Ampharos the ability. It's a foolproof way of giving it some real staying power, especially when we take into account how slow it is. We'll have a seriously reliable utility Pokemon. Now, all this talk of Ampharos is definitely glossing over the elephant in the room, which is Mega Ampharos. Since ZA is coming in hot sometime soon, we're sure to see the return of the luscious locks of this dragon goat thing. But I think that all my points stand. Ampharos doesn't need to fill a hyper-offensive role, and should find some success as a defensive utility with access to electric terrain. Alright, so now let's talk about the final Pokemon from this list. Or should I say the final 2 Pokemon? That's right. I really couldn't decide between the 2 of these guys because of how connected they are. There was no chance I could talk about one without talking about the other. Ledian and Ariados are some of the most disappointing early bug types you can find in all of Pokemon. These Pokemon are not only weak, but have been weak since their first introduction however long ago. Like, bro, I don't know about you, but a base stat total of 390 just isn't gonna cut it. We need some significant foundational change to happen here. You know how I said earlier that I thought that someone here might deserve an evolution? Well, here they are. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just gonna take what we've got and make something out of it. But if talking about potential evolutions is something you like, feel free to check out this other video that I did. Shameless plug. First off, we can't go anywhere until we talk about base stats. 390 just ain't it. We've got to really crank that up here for both of these guys. Like, for real. The overwhelming bulk of second stage starters at least crack 400, but those aren't even fully evolved. Ledian and Ariados are. I say that we give a pretty significant chunk of points to both of them. How about 60? Take them from 390 to a nice round 450. That puts them right on par with another classic bug-type Pokemon, Venomoth. So where should these stats go? I hear you all yell at me through your screens. Well, first off, let's look at Ledian. There seems to be a pretty obvious hole that needs to be plugged. How in the world can anyone be expected to use a Ledian when it's rocking a whopping 35 base attack? I say we dump all 60 of the points we're giving to Ledian straight into attack. Now 95 isn't incredible, I know, but it sure as hell runs circles around 35. Now with Ariados, it's equally obvious where we need to make some changes. Ariados is slow, with only 40 speed. And for me personally, that doesn't make any sense. Like, doesn't Ariados look like it should be fast? Is that just me? At any rate, I say we take 40 of those points that we've got and take Ariados' speed up to 80. And the other 20 I think should just be split between defense and special defense. What we're left with is a pretty evenly balanced Pokemon. Now let's talk types. Ariados I think is perfectly fine to remain as a bug poison type. It's really fitting, and it doesn't seem necessary to me to mess with that. Ledian, on the other hand, is begging for a change. I don't even feel like it's necessary to say, because I know that we're all thinking about it. Ledian should be a bug fighting type. Like, for crying out loud. The little dude has boxing gloves on. Now, I know that this is a really popular idea because in like half of the ROM hacks that change types for Pokemon, Ledian gets changed into a bug fighting type. What can I say? It's a good idea. Now, Ledian's move pool should also reflect the new typing that we gave it, as well as its change to being more physically inclined. Fighting moves like close combat and the elemental punches should definitely enter into its set. Ariados has a fairly alright move set, but there's one thing that I want to focus on specifically, and that's the move Toxic Thread. Now, this is a fairly new exclusive move for Ariados and Spinarak as of Gen 7, and it's essentially String Shot, but it also poisons. Personally, I think that this move is really cool, and I think that it's especially cool that Pokemon like Ariados are getting unique moves years after their debut. But I think that this move just needs one change. It should inflict bad poison. I mean, it literally has toxic in the title. It should at least be causing bad poison to happen. Something like that could make this move so much more dynamic and valuable. As far as abilities are concerned, I think that the only thing that I would change would be to make both of these Pokemon's hidden abilities just their normal abilities. The new offensive Ledian with easy access to Iron Fist would definitely be great, and then Ariados with Sniper would also work really well. All in all, I think that what we've done for these Pokemon goes infinitely beyond anything that may ever happen, but if talking about Pokemon like this was something that you enjoyed, feel free to like this video and subscribe. And if you have any ideas as to the Pokemon that we talked about, or any that I didn't, make sure to let me know in the comments. And if you're hoping to join the growing JarVitar community, make sure to join our Discord server linked in the description. And as always, if the Pokemon TCG is something that you're into, make sure to follow my brother Jarchomp Collectibles. And with that, peace out, Pokemon trainers.